Hi, everyone. My name is Brielle Jaekel, and I am the editor-in-chief of FreightWaves. I am here today with Spencer Tenney, who is the president and CEO of Tenney Group. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You did. Well done.
Awesome. And today we are here for our summit, and we are talking about mergers and acquisitions in freight. Thank you so much for coming on with me today. Do you want to give like a little bit of background about why mergers and acquisitions is so important to you?
Right. Well, this is a wonderful industry, beautiful industry, but often it can also be very easy to get in, but sometimes difficult to get out. And what we've done as a practice is to try to create processes and unique relationships across a global marketplace to help people navigate the nuances of buying and selling transportation logistics companies, and just making that much easier than it would be otherwise. And so that's our great pleasure, and we love helping people realize the American dream as part of that process.
Awesome. Well, it has been a crazy last couple of years for freight. And especially now with the election and the end of the great freight recession, as Craig Fuller would say. But how do you see the overall M&A landscape in the freight industry shaping up in 2025?
Well, we're already seeing some very positive signs, and I would say that it was extremely quiet from an M&A standpoint for the first half of 2024. And if you think about contextually, we were coming back off of 2023, where we had close to a dozen interest rate hikes over a 12-month period, which just completely spooked the market and paused, much of the M&A activity that should have taken place during that period, and it pushed it forward. But even I think because of, to your point about a stubborn freight market, it even kicked it further down the road. And so what we have is all this pin-up demand, inventories of companies available to purchase, and people that have wanted and needed to offset rising cost of operating in this space. So we just think that it's shaping up to be a really interesting 2025 from a volume of activity, for sure.
Are there any specific subsectors within the freight that you would anticipate will see an increased activity in mergers and acquisition?
Well, where we're seeing, and just a matter of fact, just last week closing a deal with Henneth and Hagen Johnson, and I think that's a great profile. Where we've seen a drop off on major M&A activity of these large transformational type transactions. Largely because increased cost of capital and just uncertainty about the marketplace. So in substitution of that, you see highly prolific acquirers adjusting their target profile for deals. And what they're getting is smaller deals that maybe don't have a significant trajectory of growth, but their earnings are insulated from some of these more macroeconomic factors that have been so detrimental to the performance of companies in our space over the last 24 months. And so, these little smaller type transactions that are just, use a sports analogy, more like, just singles versus trying to go for triples and home runs on these acquisitions. That's kind of what we're seeing. And I fully expect that to continue in the first half of 2025. I think people are going to continue to be very conservative until there is a consistent show in the freight market that we're headed in the right direction. Even as prophetic as Craig Fuller is, I think that there's going to be a trust and verify type response to some of these, publication and these predictions.
Right, I agree, and obviously the election had a lot to do with all this flurry of activity that we've been talking about with the uptick and the recession being over. How do you think specifically it'll affect mergers and acquisitions?
Well, I think that in general, ultimately what it's going to do over the course of the next 4 years, I think it's going to accelerate significant and give license for people to be very aggressive, because the broader environment, be it regulatory or whatever, I think that people are going to have much more confidence, whether it's warranted or not. I think the majority of people are going to feel much more confident in putting capital work in this environment versus, maybe what the last previous years. But I do think it's going to take some time for folks to get comfortable with that. And the key for successful M&As is you don't need an ideal environment. You just need a stable environment. And I do think in this first 6 months, where with all of the, the political headlines around tariffs and the uncertainty of what that might mean from a pure freight market, like how might that help or hurt? I think there's going to still be a very cautious market as it relates to valuation. But I think once we kind of get through the initial transition of new leadership, I think that's where you're going to start to see valuations open up. And I also think that you'll see a much more aggressive demeanor from your buyers that, like I said, have been on the sidelines for a long time with a lot of dry powder to put to work, but just haven't had the right deals to go put to work.
Do you think that technology, obviously, I think we've been seeing quite a lot of acquisitions in the freight tech field specifically, but do you think technology has a role to play in general in the mergers and acquisitions landscape?
100%. And I mean, we actually represent a freight tech company right now. And I think what will be interesting, there's some major cautionary tales over the last 24 months where people have understandably pumped the brakes a little bit in terms of how cavalier they've been on valuing tech companies. And so I think what you're going to see in the market is the recognition that it is much more cost effective to buy versus build as it relates to technology. The key will be being disciplined and to make sure that there's enough shelf life before that particular technology becomes obsolete. And I think that's really what people want to be careful about, is that, number one, it's solid, it's insulated, it has the ability to grow, and obviously it's helping an existing investment in this space become more valuable.
Right. Absolutely. Do you think that we could see any mega mergers between any big freight carriers or logistics?
I do.
Provider?
I think we might see a handful, quite frankly. I don't know if we'll see them in the first half, but certainly in the second half. And you hear the expression that, that people will say, this is not your granddaddy's transportation logistics industry. And that's true, because I think the problems have become so challenging in this space that, it's almost like if you can't beat them, join them. And that what we're seeing a lot of folks is just saying that it doesn't make sense for me to fight this fight alone anymore, because it is such an overwhelming proposition. However, if I join forces with a larger company, or if we merge and create some new levers to combat all of these rising expenses and the threats within the marketplace, be it nuclear verdicts or what have you, I think that's what you're seeing is you come off the roller coaster ride that we've had the last, call it 36 months. People have done well. Some people have not done well, but I think all are pretty well exhausted at this point. It has been extremely trying, no matter how you've kind of wound up on the other side of this cycle. And so I think there's an openness, to answer your question, like I've never seen before, in terms of people being open to how they might reinvent themselves to find a better way to confront the future and win.
Right. You think about all the changes that happened directly after COVID. I mean, so many people went quick to buying, more capacity, more investments. But then we saw that demand shrink right afterwards. So I would assume that would affect mergers and acquisitions quite a lot. That just whole up and down last couple of years that we've had.
Well, I think without question, I think what it does, it creates a lot of uncertainty when you kind of artificially inflate the value of equipment and then it immediately drops down. What it does, it creates significant challenges, because you have a lot of folks that, have a good company, but unfortunately their balance sheet's upside down because they replaced the entire fleet during the most expensive period in, history. And so I think for that reason, there's a lot of people that want to exit, but quite frankly can't. I also believe that there's a lot of folks that were artificially propped up by PPP money during COVID that ultimately would have left the market and ultimately probably indirectly played a role in prolonging this extended freight recession. And so all that being said, there's folks that should have exited that have not yet. And because of that, I think that there's going to be an interesting pool of available companies to purchase that could transform the entire trajectory of somebody's future in this space in 25 and beyond.
Yeah. Well, just have one last question for today. What do you think of the potential risks, but also opportunities are there for smaller freight companies in this consolidating market?
Yeah, I think that I would give confidence to some folks. We work with companies. I mean, this is our 53rd year of doing deals in transportation logistics. And so we're going to close a handful of more before the year's out. Hopefully we'll announce them when this is released. But I think that I've done multiple conferences on this over the last year, and we talk about the 9 differentiators that separate acquisitions and losers. And really, what it boils down to is the things that make the greatest acquirers the best at what they do is that they have very specific disciplines that everyone can do. I mean, there's no cost of entry. I think, and my encouragement is educate yourself about the process. And once you do, you're going to find out that growing through acquisition can be something that changes how you create value in your business and also how you produce personal wealth. Once you get your first one under your belt, everything else becomes so much easier.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think, it's going to be a really, really interesting next year. And I'm really excited for that second half of the year when we see people actually doing things, right?
It's gonna be there'll be a lot of announcements, and so I'm excited to come back. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, awesome. Tune in for the rest of the day for all the great stuff that we have coming up, and thank you guys for watching.